Hello, I am Theresa, Associate Professor at Montana Tech, and this lecture series covers attack rates, outbreak investigations, and measures of prevalence. It follows along with our textbook, Chapter 2, Measures of Disease Frequency.
Reported in at least 16 states so far. Officials from 2 of those states have said they think the outbreak is linked to a prepackaged salad mix, but others say they're not really sure it's the salad to blame. Let's talk about it with Dr. Mark Siegel with the Fox News Medical A-Team. Doctor, good to see you.
Good to see you, Shannon.
All right, we all need to eat more salad, probably. That's a good thing.
I don't want to stop that today.
No, we don't. And you certainly don't want to assign any scare or blame. When we don't know the source, who actually is responsible for tracking this down? Is it the CDC? How does it work?
Well, that's already part of the problem because it's kind of in the gap. The CDC is involved, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, when people are already sick. People are starting to get sick. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is involved when it's food. But the problem is, before it becomes food, it's a vegetable. It's something growing in the ground. Then the USDA is involved. So there's a gap in food safety between the USDA and then the FDA. See, all these organizations are involved, but there's a big gap. And that's the problem in this case. Now, we're talking about something called cyclospora, which is a parasite. It's a protozoa, one-cell organism that actually does it all itself. It doesn't band together like colonies of bacteria. But the problem here is, and the advantage is, it isn't communicable person to person. So if you had it on your hands, I wouldn't get it, Shannon, by shaking your hand.
It's got to be ingested?
No, it lives in the environment.
Okay.
In other words, so it's on fruit and vegetables, and then it lives in the environment, and then a week later it becomes infectious. Then you can harbor it for a week before you get sick. Then it lodges in your small intestine. You get watery diarrhea, you get vomiting, nausea, muscle aches, and you get pretty sick from this, dehydrated, especially in the summer. But the problem with trying to figure out where it came from, well, a salad mix starts with many different vegetables, right? You have carrots, you have lettuce, you have tomatoes, and then there's issues with food handlers. So this could have actually started at a food handling, a plant where the salad is made. By the time they started tracking it, it was already off the shelves.
Right.
So they can't go back in time and piece it together. So it's very hard. So I don't want people out there to think this is the Centers for Disease Control fault, because by the time they're involved, it's often hard to be a reverse detective on this.
Especially if you say it would be in your system even for up to a week before you would know that you would get sick.
That's exactly right. And we have almost 400 cases already,
Yeah.
but the good news is you're not going to get this by shaking somebody's hand.
Yeah.
So it's not going to become wildly infectious. It very rarely comes to the United States. The last time we had an outbreak like this of cyclospora was back in 2005. Now, if I'm checking stool in one of those states, someone comes to me sick, I can ask the laboratory to check for cyclospora, and that's a very good thing for doctors to be doing right now.
All right. Well, we know a lot of folks have been hospitalized. Thank you for giving us a good overview, and hopefully the detective work will be successful in tracking the source.
Hopefully, because it can get you pretty sick.
Yeah. All right, Doctor.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Our objectives for this module are twofold. First, to understand the process in a basic outbreak investigation, as well as demonstrate, again, the interaction between the host, the environment, and the infectious agent. And here we're going to start to introduce some measures of disease frequency. So remember, epidemiology is what is upon the people. We measure the distribution in the determinants or the characteristics of disease. And this is one way in which we measure the rate or the frequency of disease. So we're going to be calculating attack rates as well as relative risk, and these are both incident rates. And so let's just define what an incident rate is. It's new cases in a population that is at risk of developing the disease. And because it's a rate, it has to occur over a period of time. So this dimension is just like driving miles per hour. It's the speed. It's how fast disease is occurring in the population. And therefore, this is a measure of disease risk. So some other terms for attack rates are relative risk, probability of developing the disease, or cumulative incidence. This is different than incidence density, which we'll talk about a little later. So we're just looking at outbreaks and kind of this first calculation that we do. So just a quick review. we have this interaction of the host, which is a human, in some kind of environment which promotes the disease. So it brings the agent in contact with the human, and because the environment is right, and temperature may be one of them, the host or the human becomes infected. In outbreak investigation, we're looking at primarily infectious disease. So bacteria are agents. They're carried to us through some kind of vector, so that would be the food. And we get it in our mouth, in our GI tract. So that's our mode of transmission. So just keeping these terms kind of in the forefront, although we're talking about something that's really easy for most of us to grasp, right? So first I'm going to start with a brief discussion on outbreak investigation, and then we'll calculate some attack rates. So just a disclaimer, this isn't to make you a disease scientist, it's just to get you familiar with some of the steps. So some important highlights are that there's evidence that there is actually an elevated level of disease in the population above this endemic, which is the background level of a disease in a population. So for something like flu, we don't have any background level, so it's easy to see an epidemic or an outbreak. And then you really have to define the case definition, what a case is and what the symptoms are. And then you try to find time, place, and person. So the people that were affected over what time, what kind of environmental factors are associated with it. And then we calculate our rates so that we can investigate the sources. So person, who is a case? What defines a case? Place, where was the case infected, or where are we seeing a number of cases? So for example, in Madison County, one time we had an outbreak of a waterborne agent, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I certainly will by the end of the presentation. And we realized that we were getting a number of cases at Ennis Hospital, as well as some coming through Ruby Valley Hospital. And it was the treating physicians who were able to um, relay back to the public health department that they had a number of people coming in with really bad um, diarrhea, as well as becoming dehydrated. So attack rates are incidence, or measuring the outcomes of disease. So an attack rate, we need some kind of time period. So again, our incidence is the number of people who get sick over the population at risk for getting sick. So let's just pretend we are all on a cruise ship. And the number of people on our cruise ship is 16. So the percentage of people at risk of getting sick is 16 if they all ate in the mess between a given time period. So say the entire cruise or 3 days on the cruise. So we have to definitely define that time period. So we have 16 people on our cruise ship, and 4 of them become ill. 4 over 16 is 0.25, or our attack rate is 25%. 25% of the people on the cruise ship got sick after eating in the mess hall. So this is a very simple example of how we would calculate an attack rate. So one thing that's important about a proportion or a rate as opposed to a ratio is that the people in the numerator are also in the denominator. So if we took a look at our number here, we have 4 people in the numerator and 4 people became sick. We have 16 people in the denominator, and that those 4 people are a subset of those 16 people. And this is what makes it a proportion. And therefore, we could measure the rate at which people are becoming sick, and therefore the risk of becoming sick. So after we calculate our overall attack rate, then we can calculate our item specific or our food specific attack rate. So this will be 2 different attack rates, and we'll use them to calculate the relative risk of getting sick. So that we need people who ate a certain food item. So for example, people who ate the Salisbury steak. And then we need to know the number of people who went into the facility but did not eat the Salisbury steak. And then we have the number of people who ate the steak and are sick, and the number of people who did not eat the steak but are still sick. And so we'll get this for every single one of our food items. And if we want to put this into a 2x2 table, it'll look something like this. So after we calculate the overall attack rate, then we can calculate an attack rate for each individual food item. So if at the buffet there was ice cream and spinach and pudding, we can calculate the attack rate for each one of those by having the number of people who ate a certain food versus the number of people who didn't eat the food, and the percentage of folks who are sick and ate the food, and the percentage of people who are sick but did not eat the food. So we put this in a 2x2 table that'll look something like this. So if we had those 46 people who were sick, which ones ate the ice cream versus the 46 people who are sick, and which people did not eat the ice cream. So we have the sick people and the well people, and we can put this in a side-by-side table, or we can put it in an up and down table, whichever table is easier for you to do these calculations. So basically what we're trying to do is compare the number of people who are sick and ate the food to the number of people who are sick but did not eat the food. And then we can find out which food is causing the attack. because a certain number of people who did not eat the food are going to get sick anyways, because of cross-contamination or just getting sick. So let's look at an example. In Oswego County, New York, 46 out of 100 people became ill with gastrointestinal symptoms. The investigators learned that all the patients that went to the hospital had attended a church supper the previous evening. And so this type of data would be collected. You'd have an identifier that wouldn't necessarily be the person's age, so we can work with the data and not know specifically who we were working with. We might want to know the age of the individuals. Sometimes age can be a confounder. Maybe people may be more or less susceptible. The gender, and then we have sick people would be the yes. And this sick person ate the ham, the spinach, the potatoes, the salad, and the ice cream. And we would then have this sick person who ate the ham and the spinach, but not the potatoes, and had two different kinds of ice cream. So when we have this table, we can start to do a count. We can count the number of people who ate the ham and are sick, and the number of people who ate the ham and who are not sick. And we can take the data and put it into a data table. So 29 people who ate the ham are sick, and 17 people who ate the ham are not sick. And therefore we can calculate the attack rate. We had 17 people who did not eat the ham and are sick, and we had 12 people who did not eat the ham and who are not sick. So now we can calculate an attack rate for those people who are sick and ate the ham, and those people who are sick but did not eat the ham. So let's just do a little calculation here. If we take 29 and we divide it by 46, we come up with 63%. And if we have 17 out of 29 people who did not eat the ham are sick, that gives us an attack rate of 58%. And so now we can calculate the sick attack rate comparing those people who ate the food with those people who didn't eat the food, and take a look what our data table would look like. So taking a look at our data table, we can see that the attack rate for those who ate the ham is 63%, and the attack rate for those who didn't eat the ham is 58%. It's almost the same, whether you ate the ham or not. Same goes for the spinach, the potatoes, the salad, the jello, the rolls. The one that stands out is the attack rate for the vanilla ice cream. And so we can take these attack rates and turn them into relative risks to get a clearer picture of the agent that's likely to cause or be causing the outbreak. And we can also see if one of these agents are food items, right? Our food is our vector here. The agent would be the salmonella that was contracted inside of the food. Maybe one of our food items is actually protective. So to calculate relative risk, I take my attack rate of eating the food over my attack rate of not eating the food, and I could see my relative risk of being sick when I ate the ham was only 1.08, pretty low. People who ate the ham were only 1 times more likely to get sick than those who did not. It's not a very high attack rate. But let's look at that ice cream. So we had a 79% attack rate if you ate the ice cream and a 14% attack rate if you didn't eat the ice cream. A relative risk of getting sick when eating the ice cream is 5.57. You're 6 times more likely, almost, to get sick if you ate the ice cream than if you didn't. Now you can see that the difference in attack rates between those who ate the food and those who did not eat the food but still got sick is significantly different enough to elevate our relative risk of getting sick. People who ate the ice cream were 6 times more likely to be sick than those who didn't. So now let's look at our attack rate ratio, or the relative risk. So the relative risk of getting sick from the ham, the spinach, the potatoes, and the salad was 1. A relative risk of 1 means there really is no difference. There is no risk. Now, a relative risk of greater than 1 means you have an elevated risk of getting sick when you're exposed to that risk factor. So we're using food, but risk factors can be asbestos or isocyanates, or a protective factor of wearing your hearing protection. A relative risk of less than 1, as you see here with the chocolate ice cream, means it's protective. You were less likely to get sick if you ate the chocolate ice cream than if you didn't. But you were 6 times more likely to get sick if you ate the vanilla ice cream than if you didn't. So it looks like our culprit here is our ice cream, vanilla ice cream. So in the next few slides, I'm going to go through just an example of another infectious disease investigation, but one that's not so localized to a church function or a food outbreak. And this is actually an example of the infectious disease agent that causes West Nile virus. It's a vector-borne disease. There was an outbreak that started in the United States in 1999, and the disease detectives found a new mode of disease transmission when they had conducted their studies. So some of the clinical signs of West Nile virus, it is an encephalitis or a meningitis. You have fever, headaches, also some altered mental states with West Nile virus because of the swelling in the brain. West Nile virus was first isolated in the West Nile district of Uganda in 1937. The transmission was characterized in Egypt in 1957, and it first became apparent in North America in 1999. West Nile virus occurs in a cycle between the mosquito and birds. Some infected birds can develop high levels of the virus in their bloodstream, and mosquitoes can become infected when they bite the birds. After about a week of harboring the virus and it transforming itself inside of the mosquito can pass the virus on to more birds that they bite, or as well as pass the virus on to other animals such as horses and humans. So the next series of slides definitely shows this propagation of person, place, and time. In 1999, there was one state, that would be New York, that had a human case of West Nile virus, and 4 states that had animal cases. The very next year, we had 3 states with human cases and 12 states with animal cases. 2001, we have 4 states with human cases and 16 states with animal cases, almost 4 times the value of 1999. And then this was the real big jump in 2002, 41 states with human cases and 46 states with animal cases. In 2003, which was the first year that they started to screen blood for West Nile virus and realized that it can also be transmitted blood to blood through contaminated blood, just like HIV. Before, it was thought to only be transmitted from mosquito to human. You can see there's 46 cases of human cases and 47 states with animal cases. And in 2004, we had 48 states with animal cases and 41 states with human cases. And this is the last slide. In 2005, 49 states have animal cases, all but actually Hawaii, which is hidden underneath this little marker here. And this is the 2003 state map of West Nile virus across Montana counties. We have 56 counties in Montana, and near most of them were positive for animal occurrences of West Nile virus. And to highlight just one more example of how this mode of transmission through contaminated blood can be so destructive. In 1985, it was estimated that 14,000 cases of AIDS was a result of contaminated blood. And if we actually took a look at the rate in which people contract HIV or AIDS through contaminated blood today, that rate would be near zero to those who contract it in a medical setting, of course. It would be zero. Same with West Nile virus, because the blood is currently tested. So that ends our discussion on outbreaks and shows you a little bit about infectious disease propagation. I hope you have a splendid day.